Ready? Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous pouvez me faire signe si vous m'entendez en ligne? Juste un petit thumbs up. Oui, c'est bon, parfait. Merci. Donc, je suis Chantal Fabiana, coordonnatrice de recherche clinique au Centre-Ouest, sous les affaires académiques. Je suis responsable de la recherche en réadaptation physique et services multidisciplinaires. Ce sont les seuls mots que je présenterai en français, comme nos présentateurs sont principalement anglophones. So today's conference is from Yingzi Xiong, Xiong, Professor of Ophthalmology at Simerl Vision Research and Rehab Center at the Hopkins University. And we also have with us André de Grenier, who's a master's student who just finished his master's, yes, right? And also Prachi Agrawal, who is a postdoc under Dr. Xiong's supervision. She will be presenting on embracing the complexity, assess spatial function in individuals with visual impairment in common everyday tasks. So the presentation will be about 40 minutes. We have room for questions at the end, whether in the chat or raise your hand or just speak. We'll do a round in the room. We have people in the room. We also have people online. So don't hesitate to ask your questions, and it will be also recorded. We'll start the recording at the end of the questions, at the beginning of the questions, but we'll share also afterwards online on our website, Savoir Rehabilitation. So right.
Thanks for the introduction, and thank you all for joining, people in the room and people online. So it's always very interesting presenting our research to clinicians because clinicians know the best about what will work and what won't work. So we try to, we are trying very hard, including why I'm here is because we are collaborating with Dr. Joe Namergut to bring more, real life application of O&M evaluation in our research endeavors. So hopefully you can see some of our really trying work from today's presentation. So quickly about who we are. So actually my lab is a part of the low vision division at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. So we are in the School of Ophthalmology in the School of Medicine, and there are, of course, many other divisions. And our low vision is like a unique division because any patients from other division can come to us. They have this very cool system. So basically, in any other division, when the physician's patients meet the criteria of low vision, they will get an automatic prompt. Do you want to send this patient to low vision? So we are really trying to bring more patients to low vision services. And in our division, we have low vision optometrists, similar like as what you have. They will do the assessment with the patients, and then they will work with the low vision therapists and also orientation mobility therapists, as well as other referrals for addressing like psychology, cognitive, or other physical issues they may have. And then we have our research branch, which is where we are. I want to show this is because we work very closely with our clinicians. So you will see that in my presentation today, how we are really trying to think in the clinician's hands, although we are not, but really trying to understand what's important in the clinical context. And we also have our fellowship program. So low vision optometrists can come here to do their fellowship to specialize in low vision. Now, in my lab, we are XYZ Sensory Lab because XYZ is my name abbreviation. So we have two main lines of work going on. The first line is about enhancing visual environmental accessibility for low vision, which I talked about at School of Optometry. But today I will be more focusing on the second part, which is measuring spatial function in individuals with vision and hearing impairment. But as you can see, both of our study lines are very relevant to travel safety and independence. So that's why we have so much communication interactions with the O&M world. So every presentation, I kind of bring in some philosophy, why we are doing this, and kind of bring that philosophy throughout the presentation. So today I want to start from this thing that used to be still now very, very inspiring for me, which is the different aspects of vision loss, which was I did not know this until I learned more about clinical practice. So vision loss, there are 4 terms I'm showing on this slide. The first one is visual disorder, basically describing what is the pathology that leads to a vision problem. And then there is vision impairment. So 2 people with RP or AMD, they may have different acuity, contrast sensitivity. So that's basically describing how their pathology is affecting their vision. But that's still talking about the organ, right? Talking about the eye. And then there is also visual disability or visual handicap. So those are really talking about the person.
Kelly White, communicator avec la réception. Kelly White, please call reception.
Oh, okay. I thought there was a question, but I'm not Kelly. So visual disability, we are not talking about a human. Of course, from their function, we measure with the eye. The person may adapt to their vision loss differently. They may learn different skills and abilities to handle their everyday life. And then there is visual handicap. There is more big picture, social, economic, family support. All of those are contributing to how handicapped a person may feel. So this was really important for me because as a researcher trained in a sensory science, often we start from trying to measure visual impairment, which is acuity, contrast sensitivity, those kind of things. And we always ask, even now, research always asks, can you predict visual ability from vision impairment? But we know, and I heard this first time and many times, especially from O&M specialists, you always try to assess acuity, what's the smallest detail they can see, or contrast sensitivity, or their visual field, but they aren't always the best predictor for what you see in O&M performances. That was a very important message for me. So in vision rehabilitation in general, and it's a nice collaboration with the research side, you see successes in measuring function beyond vision impairment. I think the biggest success has been reading. So the MN read chart, I don't know whether you are familiar with. So that's actually developed by my postdoc mentor, Gordon Legg, in Minnesota. So pretty much every low vision clinic in different languages, they use this to measure reading function. So basically it is using sentences with different print sizes and try to see how well a person can read at different print sizes. The purpose is to find, based on your vision loss and your skill, what is the smallest letter you can still read fluently? And that's now becoming a standard. But talking about navigation, we actually don't have as much of a standardized test. So if we look at literature, how people typically measure this, there's a lot of questionnaires. There is mobility course using an enclosed space and adding like different height of foams as obstacles and see how people navigate. And recently, there is also a lot of interest in developing virtual reality environment to assess people. From my perspective, all efforts are good efforts, as long as we know what the question we are trying to answer. So from a researcher's perspective, we always struggle with a clean, so-called clean design, a controlled design, you know exactly what's happening, and a real life application. So I think a researcher, depending on the question they are asking, they can choose anything, from more laboratory to more real life. But again, because we are in a low vision clinic ourselves, so we have promises for making our research more applicable. And that's how I connected to Joe. I contacted Walter Wittich. I said, I've done many things in lab. I want to actually test people in everyday life. How do I do this? He said you should ask Joe. He's the best person for you to talk to. So Joe and I, we have been working with each other for like near 6 years now. So what's really interesting about this is researchers find it really hard to assess function in everyday life, much harder than in the lab, which also seems to be true for O&M specialists. You work with patients in everyday or clients in everyday environments because that's what they are working in. But because of how complex real life is, it's very hard to quantify a person's function or quantify the environment. It's always changing. It's whatever they choose is important to them. So we can kind of share these challenges in where I was coming from and, some general challenges in O&M. And I think it's not as a problem in Canada because for you guys, O&M services is covered anyways. But for other societies where the healthcare system doesn't necessarily cover the cost for O&M training for every person, it's really important for for people to demonstrate the effectiveness of the care. And then it becomes really important to quantify function, to measure how function can improve after rehabilitation. So this is some interesting, maybe a little philosophical slides I want to share. So what if we look at successfully standardized tests, here I'm showing the ETDRS chart for acuity, contrast sensitivity chart, the Pelly-Robson, and also Reed. Can you guess what do they share in common? Do you notice anything they share in common? Yeah, because they're all about reading, so they want to have the optimal setup. Another thing is they all try to incorporate different difficulty of the task, right? Like the acuity chart has different sizes. Then the contrast sensitivity chart has different contrasts, and Reed also have different sizes, because only by having a range of different difficulties, that's your instrument, your ruler, you can actually measure a person's function, and different person will meet the different difficulty. And it's also true, math exams, people try to incorporate different difficulties of the task. So students can always do some, and you can really have a nice scale to measure people. And this is what I was trying to say. If for a good instrument, you want to cover a range of difficulties, so you can measure people in the more fine-grained details. And what if O&M tasks can be defined in such a way that we can quantify the tasks to cover a range of difficulty, just like many other standardized tests are doing, then we can use this to measure a person's function. So that's for the intuition part of it. Actually, this is not the first time somebody think it may work this way. Outside of O&M context, in more like CLVT context, this is Bob Massoff. He was the director of my division. And this is something I really love about the philosophy of vision rehab and how they, from like a VRT or CLVT perspective, to how they try to manage this. So if we think of people's ability as a spectrum, people with normal vision somewhat all have similar vision ability, high vision ability. But people with vision loss, they will have a broad spectrum of how their vision ability can be. And now, two people come into the clinic, they may ask to meet different goals from vision rehabilitation, and very different based on their everyday life, what they care about. One person may say, I want to be able to watch TV. Another person may say, I want to be able to read an ordinary newspaper print. How do we say how much rehabilitation is really helping them? Because it's not in a lab. You can't have them watch TV for 100 times and see how well they do. So this is an interesting way they deal with this. What they do is, I call this collective voting, because it's intuitive to understand. What that means is, if there are 100 tasks patients always complain about, want to improve on, and if you ask many people in the world, how difficult do you think, or how well can you perform each of these tasks? Then based on everybody's performance, you can kind of rank the tasks based on their difficulty. Now you kind of have your ruler for this specific context. And in their case, they actually have this ruler. It's called activity inventory. They have these many questions. They ask many people, and then they actually have this ruler. Now you have this ruler, what do? A person come in and you can ask them, can you pick out matching clothes? They may say yes. Can you watch TV? They may say yes. Can you go downstairs at night? They may say no. So that's where their ability ends. It's like where they are. Now they may say, but my goal is to read ordinary newspaper print. So now you can really quantify how much is missing using this ruler you developed. Again, in their case, it's called activity inventory. So they call this difference between where the person's ability is right now and what their goal task is, the difficulty of the goal task. They call that as functional reserve. So now you have a quantifiable thing to work with, and you can train their skills, you can give them devices, or you can modify their tasks to help them meet their goal. So I love that philosophy. And for me, going back to my title, echoing my title, embrace the complexity is not necessarily escaping from that, can be quantifying the complexity if we have good ways to quantify the complexity. So can we develop something similar to the activity inventory, but more suitable for O&M context? Can we have this O&M difficulty scale that we can use to measure a person? So what contributes to the complexity of O&M tasks? So first of all, and the most difficult thing is the uncontrollable nature of everyday environment. Is it possible for us to quantify environmental complexity? Joe mentioned to me about this instrument. I don't know whether some of you are using. It's the room. I don't know if my pronunciation is correct. So basically, this is from Leo Devereaux, an O&M specialist. So they try to separate environment or categorize environments into 6 categories based on, is it static, is it dynamic, is it pedestrian self-paced, or is it traffic-paced? So I know like Joe used that in his practice. He actually tried to categorize environments based on this. And we want to do this in a more fine-grained way because you can have just 2 pedestrians around you, or you can have 10, 20. And the traffic, maybe you may have a traffic light, you may have a busy roundabout. So there are many, many more details in the environment we can potentially quantify. And the second thing about complexity of O&M actually was originally why I got so interested in this context is it's not just about vision. Actually, the world beyond arm or cane's reach is overwhelmingly bimodal. There are many, many things just visual. I'm making a little pie based on my own understanding of what are the events in the world that we can't reach with our hands or our cane. So there are many things, houses, books or chairs, those are visual objects, but there are so many things. And I know this is like an important part of O&M training is there's this acoustic information. There are so many sounds in the environment, people, cats, animals, cars. Many things are actually bimodal, meaning they have both visual and auditory information in their nature. And then there are a smaller portion, at least for me, I can't imagine more things with just sound. Maybe there can be digital music, maybe there can be wind blowing, maybe when you're having a phone call with somebody, it's just sound, but really it's overwhelmingly vision and bimodal events. We can discuss later if my understanding was incorrect. Of course, there are other things like nice smell of coffee or food or flowers that I understand that can be important cues in O&M as well. Another thing that was why I was in touch with Walter Wittich was because the prevalence of dual sensory impairment is high, and it's going to be higher as our society age. So for them, training their hearing without considering their vision may not be the most beneficial way. So it's really important both from research perspective and from O&M perspective to really understand how senses work together in the world. We just shadowed some O&M training the last couple of days. It was very, very interesting to see how they teach the instructors to align them with the traffic and understanding the clock of the sound. Kind of prove, it's actually an important aspect to pay attention to sound in O&M practices. And then the third thing, kind of interesting, maybe our O&M specialist in the call has noticed this as well, which is performance and how the clients feel about themselves may differ. So performance is you actually measure their performance. Can you cross the street? This describes their true ability to complete a task, but they may feel differently. So if a person has very high ability in completing a task, but they think it's so hard, then they are not going to want to do the task, right? And if somebody is not doing really well performing a task, but they think they did so great, for example, crossing street, then they are going to make risky decisions. So it's actually important to also consider how one perform and how one think about their performance and try to match that perspective. So I set my stage. Now I want to invite our lab members to talk about 2 projects, which we really try to address the 3 complexities I talked about. So we will first have Prachi talk about her project, how we try to assess vision and hearing spatial function in everyday tasks.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Xiong. Hi, I'm Prachi. I'm a postdoc with Dr. Xiong's lab. So she gave an overview of what we are working as a dual sensory impairment project. So now I want to kind of piggyback on a slide where she talked about what is a person's current ability on a scale, and then we ask them what is their goal, like aim, like where they want to reach, and the difference is called functional reserve. So I'll be talking more about it, but then there is one intuitive thought that we came up with, that so we have all these tasks. And there are so many different like everyday mobility and other normal daily life tasks. Like for example, the easiest was like asking them how difficult or easy is this for you to choose or match the color of your clothes. And then the difficult might be like, are you able to go out alone and cross the street because it's a traffic intersection? So there is something which Joe always also pushes for, and I really like this idea, and I went ahead and tried to work on. So my project is developing a real world performance based test for assessing the vision and hearing spatial functions. So beyond the room or beyond questions is like you ask these people, you get their assessment of what is their difficulty status and how difficult do they think things are. But something which Joe advocates for also is like, what is the ground truth? Like, why don't we make them perform this and actually see in real time what is their capability of doing a task and how difficult are they feeling like about the task? So the objective for the research was like developing a real world performance based test to measure that status. And also now I'll be talking about how we can like compare their perspective of the difficulty, but actually making them performing and seeing how difficult it was for them. So we came up with an idea, and this is where Joe helped us too. Like, what are the tasks? So, we should go ahead for. And we wanted it because it's a research test. We wanted to develop a clinical assessment tool. So we came up with 11 tasks, which are replicable. So it's like our first time that we have also tested a participant here yesterday outside of our lab. So we were able to replicate it so that everyone is able to do that. Also, it includes different aspects. So we have 5 tasks which are in static environment and 6 tasks in dynamic environment. So static environment is where we try to simulate a daily life situation in their house. So it is a controllable environment where we control it. And dynamic is, we wanted it to be as real as possible. So we don't do anything. We let it be a real life environment where there is noise disturbance or visual disturbances. So I'll just like quickly walk you through. So some of the static environment tasks we do is like, for example, you're sitting in the middle of a room and a smoke detector goes off. It makes a flashing red light and it has a beeping sound. Are you able to turn your head around and locate it? So we do all the tasks. These were all selected from our DSSLQ questionnaire. And like I said, we wanted to move beyond the questions and do the performance. So all the tasks, we make them perform in 3 modalities. Hearing only. So I'll give you blindfolds and you just have to hear the sounds and be able to detect. Vision only, you wear headphones and try to see and perform the task. And then audio visual, use both your senses, and we also want to see how you integrate both your senses to do the task. So both performance accuracy and perceived are recorded, so we hand record it. And all tasks are following an alternative force choice, which is like every task has different options. So how do we assess this? Is like we are using Tobii glasses for our testing. So they have a camera in the middle. It's a very lightweight wearable like glass, so you don't feel anything. It just has a wire with a battery, and it is very useful because you can move around with it. It has a good like battery capacity. We calibrate their eye fixation so that, and it gives us results later on, which is easy to data analyze, like the fixations and where the people were looking. So it has cameras which automatically tracks your eye movement. So when you perform the task wearing that, we want to later on, we can assess how did they move their eyes around, and also the head movement. Like when you located a smoke detector, you shifted. So I can see what was your reaction time. So I can show you a little glimpse of what we do. So this is the recordings from our lab where we do the task. So this is the first task. So the person is sitting in the middle of the room facing a TV. There are 4 corners, smoke detectors, and they have to locate it. So I prompt start. So as you can see, that's the blinking light, but she
Ah,
actually
right
did
there.
not point it correctly.
I understand. I was looking for the red.
So this is an audiovisual modality where she could both see the light and also hear the beeping sound. So that's how we do the first task. So there is one of the other tasks which is also static environment, where in a hallway, I am walking towards the participant and they have to assess whether am I walking straight towards them, I am to their left or their right. So those are the options.
On the right. On the left.
So this is one of the static environment tasks we do in the corridor. Then one example of, I like this personally, this task, because it is like something which everyone uses, is like we always face an elevator alley, and someone to be able to be independent needs to be able to locate which elevator door has opened. So we take them to the area in our hospital. There are 6 elevators, 3 to the left, 3 to the right, and they have to try to assess which door has opened. So every time the elevator has a ding, like a beep, and also you can see the light on the arrow. So you do it in all modalities. So here is
right, I mean left, 1. And right, 2. Is that 2 or 3? I can't tell.
So I hand record their results. So that is the performance. Like I will not prompt them. They do it on their own, 5 trials for each task. So after that, after every, like they did this, so I will ask them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being easy, 5 being most difficult, how would you rate it? And that is your perspective and self-perception. And then what they performed, whether were they right or they wrong, that is their performance. So this is one of the tasks we do on the road. Is they have to assess the speed of the car,
Increase.
whether is it accelerating, decelerating, or maintaining.
Same. Slowing down.
So this is an uncontrollable environment. We can't control what cars, even the elevator alley. So now I want to also like quickly touch upon that what exactly are, how can we analyze it? So we have to focus on 3 things. Like she also mentioned, like item measure, we call it item measure, which is the difficulty of the task. How difficult was the task? Person measure is your capacity of doing the task, like how difficult it was for you to do the task. And the difference between person and item measure is functional reserve, which we already talked about before. It is very important in this perspective because that is what is quantifiable. Like we can compare according to functional reserve. So our idea is like the functional reserve starts at 0, so it's the chance level. Positive functional reserve is like the capacity of the person to do the task. And in our analysis of this study, we want the functional reserve to be positive. And otherwise, like it can be 0, that they can barely do the task, or negative. So that's how we came up with the task, like they should have positive functional reserve. Now, this is just a pictorial representation of all 11 tasks. I've just tried to show them on a scale for all 3 modalities. So it gives a very good overview of, if you can see the scale, this is easy and that is difficult. So overall, I tested 25 participants till now. So overall on a scale, how did everyone perceive difficulty of the tasks? So if you see for the hearing only modality, they are shifted towards the right. They all thought it was difficult to perform them in hearing only. Whereas in vision only, there's a shift towards the left. It was easy. They thought it was easy. So we would expect, like, in audio visual, they will be able to maybe use their better sense or perform well. But that was not the case always. If, for example, if you focus on the elevator task here, this was very difficult to do with only audio. With only vision, it was comparatively very easy. So it should be easy in audio visual as well, but it shifts towards the right. So that also brings us to the factor that how do you use both senses together? Are you able to sensory integrate well? So that's what we say, like no one size fits all. So from an O&M perspective or a clinician, so like we said that every person has a different demand. So a person might find difficult to roam around, but maybe in the room they might be comfortable in performing a task. So the perspective and performance varies over individuals. It also varies over the senses like audio, visual, and audio visual. And also the sensory integration capacity might be different. So we have to focus on all of these, and we can come up with a better rehab intervention based on a person's specific goal. So just for an example overview, if I just draw a plot from what the data we have collected for 4 of the tasks. So this was the smoke detector. This is a conversation where 2 people are having a conversation. You have to tell who was the last one talking. This is a task which is we go to a cafeteria and you have to try to locate your friend who is waving at you and calling out your name. It is a very general everyday life thing we should be able to, those people think that they may be able to do. And that's the car cross section, like which is the nearest car. So if we plotted the functional reserve towards the modality of performance, so you can see how it varies over the tasks. And also it varies over the different modalities. Like in the smoke detector, the audio only was very difficult. They performed very worsely, but they were able to do it very well with vision only. But even with sensory integration, they were not as well. But in this task, it's opposite. This is again, vision only is a better sense, but then they were able to sensory integrate. So if we compare it now, as we said, we want to see the discrepancy between performance and perception. So if we plot the task of what I asked them, how difficult was it for you? So what you thought was, see how it changes. So they performed very worse with audio only, but they thought like their audio only, it was very easy. They rated it as 1. But the vision only, they were thinking it was difficult, but they actually performed really well. And the sensory integration, again, they marked it as not so good, but it was better. Yes.
Are your subjects visually impaired or hearing impaired, or this is your control group, or like
Oh, that's a good question. So we have like our target is to recruit 10 people in all the 4 categories: controls, hearing loss, and normal vision, vision impairment, and normal hearing, and DSI, like dual sensory impairment. Yes. So
one's an usher.
yeah, this is an Usher syndrome participant. Yeah, I should have mentioned it here. That's a good idea. So, like we said that there is a stark discrepancy between the modalities, but also like perception and performance. So that is what we want to see. And that, you know, in daily life, it helps you to not only ask them, but actually make them perform. And for an O&M or a rehab specialist, it's very important to be able to assess where are they right now in their capability and what can be improved on. And everyone might also have a different better sense. So I have noticed like some, as we say, blind individuals, when they did the task, their hearing was really good. But even for some of them, it was difficult and they thought like hearing only was very difficult. So what you have to focus on for a person for them to be able to do it well is very difficult, different and person specific. So again, like from this subject, like we see how the performance shifted over all the tasks, like audio only, vision was better, but still sensory integration was not that well. But in this task, the sensory integration, they were able to do like use it well. But if we compare it to the perspective, it's very different. I don't know why, like mostly I have observed they all are very confident when they perceive that, oh, audio only was very easy, but their performance actually doesn't show the same. Sorry, for this one. So that is what we want to see, and we have already started seeing some results from the 25 participants. So we want to push for more testing and have a very stark like contrast between perception and performance. And that is the idea of this test, is like it is a sensitive instrument for measuring the functional deficits in people with vision and or hearing impairment. And so the goal is like we want to introduce a novel method to identify and also quantify the deficits by comparing their ability and the goal task. And also our future like ideology behind it is like it can be used as a tool for clinicians, for O&M specialists, and for rehab specialists to know actually where they lie and what can be worked upon. Maybe like for a person, like if we were to train them in their using their better sense to optimal level, they may be able to perform that task more well. And also sensory integration training might help them in performing it better. So uh, so that is like my part of the complexity which I'm working on. And now I will hand over to Andre, who will be talking more about quantifying the environmental features for the O&M assessments. Because even in our training, one challenge we face is the environment is not the same. There are very different complexities. So that's what he's working on.
Awesome. Thank you, Prachi. In the interest of time, I'm going to get right into the meat of this project. So the purpose of this project is to establish a system for quantifying these environmental features that can be used to record and compare environments throughout O&M intervention and assessment. So in preparing for this, our first study was asking, are O&M experts consistent in determining these key features of environmental complexity? And then moving on to the second study, we asked, are these key features determined in study one consistent with a non-expert's interpretation of an environment? So in study one, we had 4 O&M experts, and we have a data set of 374 videos recorded under 10 scene classes. These scene classes could include an airport, in the metro, in a public square, and we gave instructions to the O&M experts to respond as if they're traveling through these environments and describe if they considered the environment more complex or less complex, depending on their effort to interact with it, which may be physical or mental. We then asked them to rate their complexity on a scale of 1 to 5 and provide key features that then drove their rating. So in our analysis, we used the ICC analysis to establish and analyze the consistency in the experts' rating of complexity across these 374 videos. And displayed below are the 10 scene classes. And then we used the thematic analysis to then summarize these different key features considered by the experts, as all of the key features we had were a wide range, and we wanted to find consistency amongst all the results that we got. So in the results, we found that there is average to good consistency on the key features and in the complexity rating across these 10 scene classes. So looking at the graph here, this shows the ICC rating for the complexity across these 10 scene classes. Above 0.5 being moderate to good consistency. And as we can see, we fell within that range for all of the 10 scene classes. And then we found the consensus on 6 key environmental features, 2 visual factors being ambient lighting and number of vision distractors, 2 acoustic factors being ambient sound and number of sound distractors, and 2 general factors being random motion and timeliness. So this brings us to study 2. We now have the 4 O&M experts, and we needed to narrow down this data set of 374 videos to a smaller subset to be able to move on to including non-experts with normal hearing and vision into this study. In doing so, we established a crossing task in order to select videos. So we chose 31 videos, and the crossing task would be defined as moving from one location to another, for example, crossing a street, moving through an airport terminal, or perhaps getting onto a metro or getting off of the metro. And we asked the experts to then go through these 31 videos again and reconsider based on the 6 key features that we then found in study 1. And they rated each video based on them for the visual factors and acoustic factors based on low, medium, and high on a scale of 0 to 3. And for the general factors of random motion and timeliness being a simple yes or no. And for the non-experts, we had a different scale. So we asked them, we gave them a prompt before each video. So we would say, imagine you're crossing a corridor to enter your gate for a flight, or imagine you are crossing the street to go directly across to the other side. And we also displayed each video in 3 different modalities: audio only, video only, and audio and video. This would then give us insight into perhaps how low vision patients could then assess these different environments. And following each video, we asked the non-experts to rate their perceived difficulty of navigating through the environment and crossing through the environment on a scale of 0 to 4, their confidence on a scale of 0 to 4, and their safety in that environment on a scale of 0 to 4. So this is an example of a prompt that then we would show the non-expert in their study. So it would say cross an intersection directly in front to go to the other side of the street. And then this would be an example of a video that they would see. So as we can see here, if we're thinking about the key features, random motion, there are clear crosswalks in which the pedestrians are moving through. There's a clear line of traffic in which we can identify hazards of a possible car turning to our left, or from our right to our left, or a car coming from our left to our right. And we can notice that there are crosswalks on either side of us. And we can also see that the ambient lighting is a little bit low lighting as it is nighttime. But in the video, we can still see the pedestrian signal for the stop sign to give them indicators to cross or not. And also timeliness to see if they can complete that task of crossing to the other side within that 10-second frame. Or if they were in that environment, if they could imagine themselves being able to complete that task. Here's another example of a street traffic assessment. And based on that scale in study 1, we saw that there was a lot of consistency in the experts' rating of complexity in the street crossing, as there are clear identifiers in how to navigate through this environment. However, as you'll see in this clip, it isn't as consistent in identifying the complexity of crossing through here. So as you can see, we don't have information of the stoplight. We know that the cars are moving from our left to our right, but there is a little bit more information that we need to be able to identify the complexity, which shows different consistency amongst these clips. Here's an example of the metro, and as you'll see in this clip, this will show random motion of people exiting the metro, which could cause issues for people being able to try to then board the metro, which could be given as a prompt to someone watching this. And as you can hear, we also have the ambient sound of the other metro coming. We have the announcements overhead. They could miss the cue to the door. So in this would be a question where we would say, how difficult would it be for you to be able to cross independently here? And we would ask this, a similar style question for their confidence and safety as well. So our analysis and our results for this, we found that throughout the 6 key features, there was correlation, and in these 3 graphs, you'll see specific examples focusing on hearing only. So as I described before, we use 3 different modalities: hearing only, vision only, and hearing and vision. So in the first graph on the left, you can see that as the number of acoustic distractors increased, it got more difficult for the and this is all based on our non-experts difficulty rating. It got more difficult for them to cross through the environment. And as the number of acoustic distractors got greater, they also felt less safe in the environment. So there was correlation between that. We also found that confidence, there wasn't as much of a correlation, as this is mostly personal based. As maybe their experience in that environment, maybe they haven't visited that environment before. So we weren't as able to find as much consistency between the key features and the non-experts rating in there. And here's an overview of complete correlational results from the 6 key features on the left across the 3 questions asked on non-experts, and then the 3 modalities listed at the bottom. And here you can also see that timeliness was a consistent factor in difficulty across all 3 modalities. As in completion and crossing these tasks, that was something that was consistently thought about. So in concluding, our goal is to establish the system for quantifying environmental features that can be used to record and compare environments throughout O&M intervention and assessment. In study 1, we resulted in identifying these 6 key features determined by the O&M experts across the 374 videos. In study 2, we established the correlation between the key features determined by O&M experts and the difficulty and safety ratings by non-experts. And then our next steps are collecting data on individuals with vision or hearing impairment, and then to implement the key features in analysis in the DS performance-based analysis, and then which all scenes, as Prachi described, were recorded using the Tobii glasses. And now I will pass it back to Dr. Xiong.
I'm just closing up everything. I know we gave a complex presentation on the topic of complexity, but you probably get a sense of we are trying to unwire the complexity, describing people's sensory functions, trying to understand the discrepancy between their performance and how they feel, and try to have a system for quantifying environment. Very ambitious goal, but Joe and I, we just got a grant to keep working on this. So we are really, really happy, people think this is a valuable work. And that's why we are here, and we hope you can help us improve. Now, just feeding you some big picture vision. So how do we see this going to end in the end? First of all, we talked about 11 tasks, and we understand not everybody's going to care about their smoke detector. So at the end of the day, it is your clients who will decide what's meaningful for them, and then you will work with them to define the tasks you care about. So it's not having you replicate the 11 tasks. It's giving you a tool that maybe you can replicate using a different set of tasks. And then this is how we envision this. Thinking about the instrument scale we talk about, basically want to give you a tool for you to actually analyze the tasks that you define in the context, how difficult the task is, based on what scale is needed. Is it scanning? Is it tracing? Is it analyzing the intersection? Based on the modality, this is person's vision better, hearing better, and environmental features. So we talk about 6 features. We understand there can be more, but which features really matters is those features that actually correlates with the client's perception as well as in their performance in Prachi's study. Those are the features that will actually matter. So if we imagine we have this nice equation, we could just give it to you. It's simply adding a bunch of things. And then you take notes on the ingredients, and it will give you a number of saying, hey, this task is about this difficulty. Now, you can have your own scale based on what task you care about. You can have your scale of numbers. You can measure your client. You can understand their ability from how they perform and their ability from how they perceive. You can understand the discrepancy between the two. Now you will have your definition of what the intervention should be about. And after your intervention, you can test again. Hopefully, you will see your client moving to the right side of the scale, meaning they are performing better. Hopefully, you see their performance and their self-perception now align with each other, so they understand their performance. So that's our big picture goal. And Joe and I are trying to collect more information from O&Ms. This is limited scope. What do you want to measure? What features do you consider important? So here just some taste. If nobody has question, we can discuss this openly. So what features you think are, in the environment makes it difficult for a client to navigate? In a perfect world, if you have all the time in the world, what kind of assessment you would like to have for your patient, for your clients? And these are 2 questions from a 15-minute survey that's included in Joe and our collaboration that we would like to understand more from O&M perspectives. So if you have time, and I'm sure Deborah can also share the link afterwards of the survey. So I'm going to end here, and this is my wonderful lab, and we are funded by NIH, if you heard about news about NIH, but we still have our funding. So we can still keep the work going. And yeah, that's our lab website. And thank you all so much for listening. And we are ready for discussions.
The recording, we have for one or two